too bad, because Charlie's here, or Amanda, whichever one. Beautiful. All right. Well, here we are. We're testing out a video format. You're actually call number 2 today. We're testing out a video format. So I wanted to thank you for that. It's going to be on YouTube since the new craze this year, and we're going to get into this year, but the craze this year is bands show up with these incredibly elaborate video setups, and they're mad at me being a podcast for not having a video setup. So since the word podcast is expanding its definition and the borders are definitely disappearing around it, we're going to try video here. So let's kick into it. Hello, and welcome to the Rock and Roll Podcast. I'm your host, John Harris. Today on Rock and Roll Podcast, we have Ventenner, and they've got a new album called Hollow Storm, which is released on November 6th via Syndical Music. Right now, I'm being joined by Charlie to share some more information about what the band has got going on, what they've been up to. Speaking of this year, aside from this release that has just now surfaced amidst this Hollow Storm.
That's some good pun work there, dude. That's impressive.
I had to do it
Your
now.
small human is next to you.
Oh, this is my son Gabriel. So
yeah,
Gabriel's
I
going to be
Gabriel before. I remember Gabriel from before.
Mm-hmm. So Gabriel's going to be our assistant engineer for the call. Is that correct, son? All right, baby.
Yeah, I was just having breakfast, so I was a little slow.
Yeah, he's having breakfast. It's okay. Some people were stuck on the tubes. So, Charlie, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello. Now, I was actually giving this a re-listen to prepare for the interview before we got onto the call, and I had some questions that I had remembered that I had before. Basically, the first thing I wanted to get into is because I know that you guys were doing a lot of this production in and around lockdown situations, correct?
Yes, yeah, but all of it, yeah.
Okay. Take us through that. What's it like to make a record in this unique situation? What sort of challenges came up? Did it actually race challenges? Was it easier?
It's actually been something I've been thinking about a lot because the album, the way it is now, like we're really happy with it and we're really proud of it. But it was supposed to be recorded in like March, April time. So that's kind of given me a lot to think about because I've been thinking, well, in an alternate universe, would this record have been different? Like, would I have written things differently? Would it have been better? Would it have been worse? Like, it's really strange. It's a strange thing to think about. We were all set to go in March and April, and then I got the virus like early March, and at that point, everyone was like, we don't really know if it's going to be a thing. We'll see. It might be a thing. It might not. And then, yeah, like kind of the tour started getting cancelled. So we were like, well, we're probably going to have to cancel the studio now. It was strange because like basically over through the summer, things eased up a little. So we could kind of do a bit of writing and a bit of prep. But I mean, for this album, we literally had no rehearsal time at all. Like we hadn't rehearsed. I think 9 of the 11 songs we'd never played together in a room or even heard. Like the guys had never heard my vocals. I'd never heard the drum parts. Like, so it was kind of weird in that respect. We'd all been learning it and playing it, but none of us had ever actually played it all at the same time. So it was weird. It was definitely strange, and we had to kind of change things up. We recorded in 3 different studios this time, and there was lots of WeTransfer and Dropbox and file sharing, and it wasn't the same as it always is. You know, it's usually everyone sits in a room for 2 weeks and drinks a bunch of beers and kind of gets on with it. This was lots of logistics and more methodical. Lots of face masks, lots of hummus. Yeah, I mean, it was a good process. It was interesting. But it was a challenge. Definitely. It's definitely the hardest album I've had to do. Definitely.
Okay. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You guys actually get Ottolenghi's hummus.
What the hell is that?
Yotam Ottolenghi. He I think he has a vegetable restaurant, a Middle Eastern vegetable restaurant in London. So as soon as you mentioned hummus, I'm just imagining you've got this, I don't know, angelic, pristine Middle Eastern hummus, as accurate as can be, crushing a few pints of whatever it is that you do. I don't know. Are you a brown ale kind of guy? A Guinness kind of guy?
No, not at all. But I am I'm a newly converted hummus kind of guy because my wife is from the Middle East and she puts it on most stuff. And she's a vegetarian and so am I. So a Middle Eastern vegetarian restaurant. I didn't know about this in London. I don't know how I've missed this, to be honest with you. Why does someone from Canada know this and I don't? This is shocking.
Very shocking. And well, because a friend of mine last year got me a free subscription to Masterclass. And recently they had this guy, Ottolenghi, on, and Samantha, my wife, sent him to me and said, hey, you love Middle Eastern food, which I do. Being Jewish, and I've been to the Middle East, and discovering that hummus can actually be good, really good.
Yes.
It sucks in North America beyond unreasonable doubt, but once you learn how to make it right, man, amazing. So there's this Middle Eastern guy, and she's like, oh, you got to check this guy out. I'm like, I have no idea who this guy is. Apparently he's from Jerusalem, went to London to go to culinary school, and then opened up a restaurant in London, has cookbooks. He's a celebrated chef. I figured this is my chance to talk to somebody who eats hummus in London. We could bond over this moment.
And a vegetarian, yeah.
And a vegetarian. And
I'm sorry, I should have been prepared. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well,
and on that note, though, my favorite beer in the world is a Lebanese beer called Al Marza. It's the best beer I've ever had. It's delicious.
Okay. All right. We'll have to put that onto the old docket and surface that at another time. But something else that I wanted to chat about, because you did the guitars on the record, correct?
No. I mean, kind of. Well, not really. I mean, when it comes to the writing part, I play a lot of the guitars, and I play guitars live. But when it comes to the actual recording, like Jono's the guitarist, so he records all the guitar parts. And I mean, on the actual writing of the songs, he's probably about 80% of it. But I come up with a few riffs, a few lines here, a bit here, and like a few bits and pieces in the early writing stage. But no, Jono does all the guitar work.
Okay, never mind. This is like the hummus thing. I was gonna go in a deep dive on the guitar, because something that I thought was really cool, and I read this in one of the snippets, I believe on Spotify actually, about how you guys started off industrial and then have started to gel into your own thing.
Yeah.
And the only example I have, and this is like a span of like, I don't know, 25 years of difference, but I heard Marilyn Manson in the car and I thought that guitar tone is wretched. It's just a box full of bees, but it fits when John 5 was doing there, fits what Marilyn was doing at that time.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to what you guys just did, and the guitar tone seems so restrained for what I think it should be with regard to what a lot of industrial guitar sounds are. But it's still very heavy, and I think it's very heavy because it's so restrained. It's so, I don't want to say lacking gain. There's definitely gain in that signal. But because I can hear the guitar instead of the bees, it's so much heavier.
Yeah, no, definitely. There's a lot of thought process that goes into the production of an album. Everything from like the themes and the lyrics to the sound to the way the songs are going to be. There's so many kind of layers, almost on a kind of sort of subconscious level, like hypnotic level, almost like subliminal messaging. So like all those things kind of played into it. So when I was coming up with the theme behind the record, I was like, well, the guitars need to be like that. They need to be infinitely deeper and more rumbling. So yeah, we switched to a 7-string, which is the first time we've used that. The last album, Nvidia, was a very much like live, charged, aggressive, kind of violent album. It was spawned out of lots of shows and excess and sort of, heavy partying and stuff. And so it had that kind of time and place. This, both lyrically is more restrained and vocally is more restrained, and also with the guitars, the whole thing there's a restraint was kind of like a running theme through it, and that ties in with the lyrical themes and the concept of the whole album, this idea of like a storm, like this idea of there's something brewing, something's coming. So yeah, that was definitely intentional.
Okay, you mentioned a few things about lyrical themes, musical themes. Take us through that. Aside from, why is the storm hollow? Is it because it's able to give birth? It has a womb, a storm with a womb?
It was kind of more... there's been a very clear narrative going through these 4 albums, and this, I feel, is the conclusion point of those 4 albums. Distortia was kind of filled with a lot of... This is the Reason and Distortia were filled with a lot of questions. NVIDIA was more a case of kind of just giving in and accepting it, but being pissed off about it. And now Hollow Storm, mirroring kind of my own life and sort of thoughts and things, it's arrived at this point where it's acceptance, that I personally feel like a Hollow Storm, in the sense that there's all this kind of bluster and violence and aggression and things going on around me, and personally and musically and everything. And at the middle, nothing really. I'm just, there's no infinite question. I'm essentially just, a lump of space dust floating in the infinite, and I mean nothing. And that is kind of how I've come to that conclusion. And it's kind of fed into a lot of other things, emotionally and personally, because I've realized I've got nothing to really be angry about anymore. There is no reason or why for me, as far as I can tell. So yeah, that's where that kind of idea comes from.
Mm-hmm. Next on the Buddha Now podcast, we're going to be chatting about enlightenment and how there really is no sorrow unless you want there to be. Something else that you had mentioned was on the previous record, I believe you said a lot of heavy partying. There's also coronavirus being mentioned. So you spent a lot of time in Florida, obviously. Take us through that. And oddly enough, there's been 3 bands I've had on who've had experience with coronavirus. Ventenner, obviously right now. And then there was another band whose drummer had it, but I wasn't able to chat with him. And then there was a guitar player who had it, and I was able to chat with him and hear more about what it was, what it was like. Take us through it, especially since you were one of the earlier cases, not one of the more recent cases.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot scarier back in March when I got it, because I literally got it on the day the pandemic was like announced on March the 11th. That's when I started feeling sick. And at that point, it was basically just stories of infinite death coming in from like mostly like Italy and China. And it was like, oh, this is gonna wipe out the planet. So I was like, whoa, this is pretty heavy. What do I do? Plus I have asthma as well, so my lungs were like, I was a bit like cautious. Amanda had it, and she seemed a bit okay, just a bit feverish. I started getting worse and worse until the point where I was like, wow, this is actually getting pretty scary. Like, I think I might have to go in and be like put on a ventilator or something, because it was getting pretty tough. And then miraculously, after like day 7, when it hit its peak, it just suddenly in the morning just got better, just started to go away. It left me like 2 to 4 weeks afterwards of like exhausted and worn down. Couldn't really do anything. I went out for a run about 2-3 weeks afterwards, and I literally got 200 meters and had to stop, which is pretty bad for a guy who can run a 10K pretty comfortably. So yeah, it was a very weird experience. And at that point as well, like, I mean, this is the same for a lot of people, but all the shops were like, the food is gone and the shelves were empty, and you couldn't get toilet paper or bread or milk, and we were eating food from the gas station at the end of the road, and like it was just weird. Like so yeah, and meanwhile, like, I don't know if this happened in Canada, but in England we had people burning 5G masks because they thought it was 5G that was causing it. So people were burning the masks and stuff, and it was weird. It was very weird. But I kind of channeled it into my own solo project stuff. I did a couple of songs to kind of go through that emotional process, because it was pretty scary at the beginning. And I know a few people that have had it really bad. Some people have been tested positive and have had no reaction or symptoms at all. Seems to be just a genetic lottery of how you get it and what happens. But yeah, it was. I think everyone should have a bit of a brush with death. I think it's good for you. I had a big one back in 2011, and it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me, because it's really puts things in perspective. It reshuffles your cards pretty damn quickly.
Okay, you mentioned a couple of things, some post-late effects. I've read some articles about people having delayed effects for a very long time. Are the delayed effects over for you then? Yeah,
no, it was literally like 3-4 weeks, like, and then I'm just back to my normal annoying self. But yeah, like it's fine.
Okay, so then also the next part is that the brush with death wears off, so you need multiple brushes with death to have these Buddha-like moments where you realize, okay.
Well, I mean, I had a bad one back in 2011. I choked, and I was like, "This is it." I got like 35, 40 seconds, and that's it. It's good night, Vienna. And yeah, that really like scared me big time. Like, and I've had ongoing like anxiety and like PTSD effects from that for years and years and years. But it's good, and I know other people who've had similar experiences like that. And you suddenly does put things in perspective. You stop getting complacent and you're like, I need to get my shit together and get on with stuff, because that idea that you're like, oh yeah, I'm getting older and I'll die one day, it suddenly becomes very, 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 very present all of a sudden. And yeah, you know, I think this year as a whole, I mean, that aside, I think people have prioritized self-care a lot more this year, mental health, physical health. You know, they've realized what's important and what needs I guess what the kind of the top 3 or 4 things that people have in their life are, you know, is it family, is it travel? What are those things that people need? And now we've had them all taken away. You know, a lot of people I know have kind of actually got weirdly a lot of positive things out of this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like you mentioned in the beginning, you're like, John, you're glowing. Well, thank you. As my massage therapist put it, most people have done the COVID-19 up, but I've done the COVID-19 down. And I don't know. I was on lockdown and I said, okay, well, what can I control?
Yeah.
Well, I can control my own daily routine. So if I'm going to be a hamster in a wheel, then I might as well get on the wheel. So I did. And, you know,
did you actually buy a wheel? I hope so.
I bought a wheel. It was like Eurovision. Or you know, the Euro Song contest. It was like that.
Oh, that's my favorite.
Yeah, with Will
no,
Ferrell.
I agree with you totally. Like, I think, you know, we're stuck with the time that we've been given. You know, I mean, you can sit around and complain, or you can get on with stuff. And you know, I've been doing my French lessons. I've been doing my kung fu. I've been meditating, running. You know, just kind of making the most out of each day, because you know you're not going to get it back. So you may as well make the most out of the year. And you know, I mean, generally speaking, I'm pretty happy with the year. Like, it's, you know, it could have been better, but I mean, the album's done. I'm in a good place. I can't complain.
It's all elliptical, really. And you know, since you mentioned
how many more of these puns are you going to get in? Like, I'm just curious. Have you got like a list in front of you?
I just might. But since you mentioned Kung Fu, fun story is, as of today, officially where I live, it's outlawed for a couple of weeks. Yeah, group gym and group fitness has been outlawed for a couple of weeks. We won't get into the politics of that and our current governmental system here in Alberta. That's a whole other story for another nugget. But I started doing Kung Fu a couple of months ago, specifically a northern style mantis.
Right.
I just figured we could have, you know, the Kung Fu podcast for 2 minutes. You said you do Kung Fu.
Yes.
Most people, how is it in London? I say I do Kung Fu and people give me a weird cockeyed glance, and then 2 days later they go, so how's karate going?
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of that. I mean, people generally like the kind of the generic stupid question is like, oh, show me some Kung Fu. I'm like, what? Like,
did you want me to kill you? Like, which way?
Yeah, like, it's a reactionary thing. If you come at me with a knife, I'll go for it. But I mean, I don't really know what I'm supposed to show you. And I think most people are kind of associated with the Matrix. So there's like, you know, kind of lots of slow motion and stylistic hand waving. But I mean, my instructor lives not far from me. So we, like, throughout lockdown, we've been kind of doing one-on-one sessions where we can. And I do stuff at home. I do my forms every day and whatever. And it's good. It's a nice discipline. Like, I've become one of those kind of annoying people where I've kind of stopped the heavy living lifestyle and now indulged in various different kind of physical pursuits to fill that void. Yeah, I mean, I love it. I get a lot out of it. I like the discipline. I like the kind of, I like that sort of Far East approach to something. You know, the Japanese are, you know, key for this as well with their cooking and their culinary things. Just doing one thing absolutely perfectly over and over and over again until it becomes absolutely flawless. And I love the idea of that. You know, mastering a hand movement or a particular form to the point where it just, you know, it can't get any better. It has to be perfect. I love that.
Mm-hmm. You have to become.
Yes, you do.
You don't want to be crossed and cursed.
No, you definitely don't want that.
Just surrender, Charlie. Just surrender.
I think that's 6. I think we're doing well.
I know. Without any displacement, without being displaced. I didn't want any late days. Speaking of which, something that I found really interesting is Surface is the lead single, I guess, off of the record, yeah?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, for now, yeah, for sure. There's going to be a few, but yeah, that's the one for now, yeah.
A few lead singles. Everybody can be first place.
Yeah.
That's always my favorite comment. It always comes from the more pompous musicians I have on who need more death, what have yous. Anyway, something else I've noticed here on between Spotify and YouTube, there's some popular tracks because the record has been out at this time of recording for what, about a 2 week, week and a half, November 6th.
Yeah, it came out a week ago today. Yeah, last Friday.
Okay. So I don't know how much these numbers have really tabulated just yet, but Spotify, Elliptical, and Surface are really popular tracks, and on YouTube, Late Days is a really popular track. I'm just curious. Obviously, Surface has been pushed for marketing reasons, but Elliptical and Late Days, do those come as surprises?
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot about this album that came as a surprise. I mean, usually when you kind of go in, you kind of go, oh, this sounds really cool. And then sometimes you go to play it in the studio to play live and go on tour. And you're like, oh, that sounds terrible. Let's not play that. And whereas this was kind of the opposite. We kind of went in with all the songs written and we're like, we know how they're going to sound. They're going to sound great. And then they just kind of came out of nowhere. I had my like top 2 or 3 for the album, and I was like, yeah, these are going to be the best ones. Completely changed my mind on all of them. Elliptical, it was a last minute addition, really. It was something that Jono had written like all the riffs for, and he's like, what about this? I was like, yeah, that sounds badass. Let's do that. And it was really, really last minute. Late Days, again, very different for us, and they came out just way better than we expected. Once we put the vocals on and we'd done everything else and changed some things in the process, they just kind of transcended everything we'd expected from them. And I do find it interesting as well. Like, I was actually looking at the Spotify stats the other day, because the songs that I think are the best aren't always what other people think are the best, which is pretty standard. But like
wrong, but yeah.
Yeah, but some are like my favorite tracks we've done. Like if I had to pick like the top 2 or 3, I think are the best things I've ever written. They're not even in like the top 50. So it's really strange for me to see what people connect with. And I've had some people say to me in the past, like older tracks, they're like, "That's my favorite song you've ever done," and I'm like, "Really? It sucks. I'll never play that live. I hate it." So yeah,
we conceived our child to that song.
It's been cool to see the response to it, and I think also because Elliptical and Late Days they're the biggest kind of musical shift for us. There's like a big kind of crunchy, hefty new metal kind of sound going on there, which is not something we've done before. So I think people were surprised, and maybe we've gained a few fans, new fans along the way as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask with a lot of what's going on with this record, production-wise, the way that it was produced, recorded, some of the material that's shown up on it, do you think this is like a once-in-a-lifetime thing for Ventenner, or do you feel that this is going to shape-shift the way things are going to go on for the next record?
I already have the plans for the next record and the one after that. So I tend to work like a long way in advance. I come up with themes and ideas and like all kinds of things very, very far in advance. This one, as I said, was a bit of a surprise, but it was something that I wanted to have in mind, that idea of restraint. And I'd done 3 albums with a lot of screaming, especially the last one was just screams for days. So I was like, I wanted to purposely dial that down a lot on this one. So the sound on this fits this place and time, and I think we will definitely, there's elements of this that we'll take forward to the next album, but I think every album we ever do is going to be a big jump in one way or another. A buddy of mine, when he was asking about the album like last year, I said, well, it's going to be a change of direction, and he was just like bereft. He was like, no, don't change it.
Just like that. Don't worry. No.
It's going to be a change for the good thing. We're going to go in a good way. I mean, I wouldn't consciously write a terrible record and be like, well, that's what I wanted to do. But there were things on this that we tried differently. You know, unexpected song arrangements. There's weird time changes. There's things that don't like just come out of nowhere, really. And I don't think we'll do that again. But I think there's going to be these kind of little bits along the way that work, and if they work, they get carried forward, and we build around it, and then we carry those things forward again, and we build something new around that. And but I am really enjoying the crunchier, heavier metal stuff on this album for sure. That's been a lot of fun to make.
Yeah, personally, I feel, from having heard your guys' work along the way, this is my favorite release so far, and it's hard to exactly pinpoint why. But I think for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned, is it starting to transcend into perhaps a few other metal genres.
Yeah, I think it was weird actually when we went into the studio. Another kind of unexpected thing. These songs seemed really different. Like they all seem so like spread out, and I tend to write the initial ideas. Like I said earlier, all fitted around a concept that all feeds into itself, and it all gels together. And this, I was kind of worried. I was like, is this just going to sound like 10 or 11 songs that are just on the same record? Like, and weirdly, when it was all done in sequence, and I listened to it, I was like, this is actually the most cohesive thing I've done. It flows really well. I was like, how did that happen? I have no idea how that happened.
Sometimes it just rains down,
Ah, yes, it does. Yeah.
There's a code underneath.
Double a twofer. Yeah.
Well, that's all the tracks on the album now. I don't have any more because there are no more tracks on the album. Yeah.
But yeah, like it was. I think it's my favorite release so far. I think as well. I mean, I feel like I'm bad mouthing the other ones behind their backs, but I do think it's my favorite release, not just because it's the most recent one, but I don't know. It seems to have. We seem to have just hit a slightly higher plateau on this. We seem to have reached another level of what I wanted to do. And I think most musicians, when they're trying to get that sort of, sound in their head out, a lot of the time it's like, oh, it's really good, but it's not quite there. And this kind of seems to have hit a lot of, there's moments in this where I'm like, that's exactly how I wanted it to be. So I'm very happy with it.
Yeah. I mean, even, I think it was Late Days. There's a really dark piano in there, and the guitar tone is dark, and everything's dark, but I can clearly hear everything, and that is a very difficult thing to pull off in a mix.
Yeah, I mean, so Greg Chandler, who mixed the record, he's mixed a lot of our stuff over the last few years, and he's been doing bands for years. He's like he started Esoteric, like a doom band, years ago, and he knows his stuff, and he knows exactly how we want to sound. So we can send him a whole bunch of stuff, and he'll be like, right, I know where this needs to be, and he'll kind of tinker with it and take a few liberties here and there, and it always comes out exactly how we want. So yeah, there's a certain art to it, but I mean, also we don't make it easier for people, because when it comes to engineering and mixing and mastering, we chuck so many layers in. So much stuff that all blends together, like synth sounds that are hitting the same frequencies as guitars. And I mean, I do feel sorry for, anyone that's having to tackle that vast, like, I mean, our mixing ran over by like a week. I think it ran over so much because it was just too much to do. So yeah. But no, like you said, it's nice because you can hear all those elements. They're all important as well. They're not just put in there to like beef up the track. They are there for a reason.
Don't you guys have an album with something about a reason in there, or am I wrong?
Yeah, that was the first proper release. This is the reason. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the reason. Right there.
Yeah.
Right there. You heard it. Beautiful. All right, now we have somewhere in there. There you are. Hello. We have chatted about Surface, Elliptical, Hollow Storm, the record production, what's been going on this year. We even touched base on Kung Fu and what else did we talk about? We talked about a lot of really good stuff.
COVID, Hummus.
Hummus. Hummus. And I know it never gets old. Is there anything that I missed that you wanted to chat about? Because I think we covered everything, but is there anything that I missed that you wanted to chat about?
No. I think I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Beautiful.
I think I covered it. No, I mean it's kind of weird because it feels like this year feels like we've been really busy and put loads into it, but it also kind of feels like around about now we'd be announcing like a tour and be like, hey, we're gonna come and play this to you in person, and so it's kind of weird. It feels like it's kind of like been a big fanfare, and it's like ta-da, and then just sort of nothing for a bit. But it's good. It's going to give us time to focus on building the band, promoting the record, spend the next 3-6 months just really pushing it, and then when the world gets back to normal next year, we've already got a tour planned. So we can start doing that again.
January 1st, 2021, right at 12 a.m. Everything goes back to normal.
That's the plan.
Yeah. 0, 0, 0, 0.
You know what I'm looking forward to, Charlie, is the people who think that, and then when it doesn't happen, they'll be upset till at least February.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know why people. It's like the opposite of the millennium bug. Like, I don't get it. Like, it's
Beautiful. All right. Well, that concludes all of my questions. So thank you so much for coming on to the Rock Metal Podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. As always, it's always a pleasure.
Indeed. No, don't hit stop. We got to hit stop recording.
Yeah, well.
and the Buddha Now podcast and the Kung Fu Now.
Actually, I had a question. Like, at what point is the word podcast going to be phased out? Because literally no one uses iPods anymore.
Yeah, that's a great question because my least favorite question is, are you a podcast? Yes, the Rock Metal Podcast is a podcast. But the next part of it is where the word podcast comes from is back in the day when you actually had to hook up an iPod to iTunes to download something onto your iPod. So it was a podcast because of the iPod. However, even that framework hasn't existed for, at this point, like over 10 years, if not 15 years.
Yeah.
So the word podcast is just being used now for, I guess, any kind of a audio program that is not professionally produced, but even some of them are professionally produced, like the BBC radio podcasts.
Yeah.
Which has split emotions, because I've chatted with people who work at CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and they're very split. Like, screw podcasts, they're the devil. And then the other ones who were like, hey, this is the wave of the future, let's hop on it. And I don't know, it's kind of interesting. Think about.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not in the podcasting world, so it's very curious to me, because I was like, is it going to become cloud casting, or I don't know. I was curious about it. Yeah.
That's very interesting. And the funny thing is, I don't even consider myself to be in the podcasting world either, because there's so many things going on out there I don't even know about that I found out about recently. Like, there was a podcasting convention here in my very own city, and I was like, what? And they'd never heard of me. I'd never heard of them. I'm like, I've been podcasting in this city for over 4 years now. How come we've never heard of each other? So it's still not a very connected community either.
Yeah, no, that is Luke, our drummer, actually, because me and him are both big runners, and he never listens to music running. He only listens to podcasts, which I think alarms other runners now and again, because you're running through the woods, a guy comes towards you and then just bursts out laughing for no reason. It's a little disconcerting from what I can tell for other runners, but he seems to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm. Hence the big Nike symbol on your shirt. You're doing it.
Yeah.
Kung Fu Podcast.
I'm old school. When I go for a run, I have nothing, and it helps me to clear my mind and to motivate myself, because I feel at that moment I don't need to put anything else in. I just need to exist.
Kung Fu Podcast.
Fair enough.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and hit